The first glimpse comes without warning, and it lands like a blow to the chest. Through the lens of Josslyn's binoculars, the silhouette of Wyndemere rises against the sky, and something feels terribly wrong. The angles are cleaner, the shadows thinner, the menace stripped away. The castle that once seemed to breathe darkness now looks almost harmless. In that instant, the sense of danger that defined generations of secrets vanishes, and the shock is not just Josslyn's, but the audience's as well. Wyndemere has changed, and the change feels like a betrayal of memory, power, and fear. The question hangs heavy in the air. Why would General Hospital dare to do this to one of its most iconic symbols? For decades, Wyndemere was more than stone and towers. It was a character in its own right, looming over Port Charles like a warning. Every corridor whispered of old crimes and buried obsessions. Every shadow promised that something terrible could happen at any moment. So when the binoculars reveal a renovated castle stripped of its Gothic soul, the moment becomes the most dramatic turn of all. It is not a gunshot or a slap or a deathbed confession. It is the quiet horror of realizing that the past itself might be erased. This shock opens the door to a deeper unease that ripples through fans and characters alike. The sudden transformation feels unexplained and unsettling. There was no build-up, no announcement, no narrative preparation. One day Wyndemere was the embodiment of danger, and the next it looks like a polished shell of its former self. For many viewers, the reaction is immediate and visceral. They do not just dislike the new look. They feel something essential has been taken from them. The old Wyndemere was inseparable from the Cassadine legacy. Generation after generation lived and schemed within its walls. It witnessed betrayals that tore families apart and alliances forged in blood. The castle stood as proof that the Cassadines were not like anyone else in Port Charles. They were larger, darker, more extreme. To soften Wyndemere is to soften that history, and fans are not ready to let go of it. When Nicholas made his catastrophic mistake and lost the castle, the transfer of ownership already felt like a wound. Ava claiming Wyndemere was controversial, but still the castle itself remained intact. Its atmosphere did not change. Its presence still carried the weight of everything that came before. Even when Ava sold the property, the assumption was that Wyndemere would endure as it always had. Sidwell becoming the new owner introduced a fresh variable, but not one that viewers expected to rewrite the castle's identity. Sidwell's arrival brings with it renovation and restoration, but also confusion. Yes, he replaces certain interiors, updates rooms, and modernizes aspects of the property. That much makes sense. Owners renovate. What does not make sense is the apparent impossibility of the transformation. Wyndemere could not realistically be torn down and rebuilt from the ground up without a major storyline acknowledging it. No permits, no construction arc, no dramatic reveal. Yet suddenly the exterior itself looks different, as if the castle has been quietly swapped for another reality altogether. This lack of explanation fuels frustration. Fans are not just reacting to aesthetics. They are reacting to storytelling logic. General Hospital has always thrived on continuity, on the sense that actions have consequences and history matters. When a landmark as significant as Wyndemere changes overnight, without narrative justification, it feels like a crack in the foundation of the show's world. The backlash is swift and loud. Viewers take to discussions expressing disbelief and disappointment. Many say the new castle lacks the eerie presence that once made every Wyndemere scene electric. Others argue that without its Gothic menace, the castle becomes just another location stripped of symbolic power. The fear, the anticipation, the sense that something awful could happen at any second is gone. And yet the question persists. Why would General Hospital risk alienating its audience this way? The show is known for honoring its legacy even while evolving. It seems unlikely that such a drastic change would be made lightly. This leads to speculation that something happened behind the scenes, something that forced the show's hand. One rumor rises above the rest. The possibility that the original castle set or model suffered damage, perhaps even a fire during filming. If true, this would explain the urgency and secrecy. A fire would not just be a minor setback. It would require extensive repairs, time, and resources. In the midst of an ongoing storyline, waiting may not have been an option. Production schedules are unforgiving, and the narrative cannot simply pause. If the old Wyndemere was damaged beyond immediate use, the show may have had no choice but to introduce a replacement. A new model, a new set, something that could be used right away to keep the story moving. From a production standpoint, the decision makes sense. From a storytelling perspective, it leaves a void. This tension between practical necessity and narrative integrity sits at the heart of the controversy. Fans understand that accidents happen. They know television production involves real-world constraints. What they struggle with is the silence. No acknowledgement within the story, no dialogue hinting at renovations or changes. The castle simply appears altered, and the audience is left to piece together explanations on their own. This silence creates an eerie parallel to the castle itself. Just as the new Wyndemere feels empty of its old spirit, the lack of explanation feels like a missing piece of the story. It is as if the show expects viewers to accept the change without question. For a fanbase deeply invested in history and detail, that expectation feels misplaced. There is also the emotional weight of what Wyndemere represents. It is not just a Cassadine home. It is a symbol of danger, ambition, and the darker side of human desire. Many of the show's most unforgettable moments unfolded within its walls. To see it sanitized feels like rewriting those memories. At the same time, hope flickers beneath the anger. Some fans believe the change is temporary. They imagine a future reveal where the old castle returns restored and more ominous than ever. Perhaps once repairs are complete, the familiar towers will loom again, casting long shadows over Port Charles. Perhaps the new castle is merely a stand-in, a placeholder, until the real Wyndemere is ready to reclaim its role. Others speculate that even without fan pressure, the production team intends to revert to the original. Once the old model is repaired, the story could quietly shift back, leaving the new version behind. In this scenario, the current controversy becomes a brief but intense chapter in the castle's long history. What makes this moment so compelling is that it blurs the line between fiction and reality. The drama is not confined to the screen. It extends into production decisions, fan reactions, and the fragile balance between honoring the past and adapting to unforeseen challenges. Wyndemere's transformation becomes a meta-storyline about loss, change, and resistance. As the narrative continues, the castle stands as a silent question mark. Will its darker essence return, or is this the beginning of a permanent redefinition? For now, the audience watches with wary eyes, remembering what Wyndemere once was, and hoping that the shadowy heart of the Cassadine legacy has not been lost forever. The opening shock through Josslyn's binoculars sets the tone for everything that follows. It is a moment that forces characters and viewers alike to confront the uncomfortable truth that even the most enduring symbols can change without warning. And in Port Charles, where history is everything, that realization is perhaps the most dramatic twist of all. The unease surrounding Wyndemere does not fade after the first shock. Instead, it settles deeper into the consciousness of Port Charles like a slow, spreading chill. Conversations begin quietly at first in hospital corridors, coffee shops, and living rooms where longtime residents share the same troubled thought. Something is missing. The castle may still stand on Spoon Island, but the spirit that once defined it feels absent, and that absence refuses to be ignored. Josslyn cannot shake what she saw through the binoculars. The image replays in her mind, not as a single moment, but as a lingering question. She remembers stories told in hushed tones about Wyndemere, the kind of stories that made it sound alive and dangerous. What she saw did not match those legends. This disconnect gnaws at her because in Port Charles, history is not abstract. It shapes decisions, relationships, and fears. When a place loses its past, people begin to wonder what else might be erased next. Older residents feel the change even more acutely. For them, Wyndemere is not just a backdrop for drama, but a landmark tied to personal memory. They recall nights when storms battered the island and lights flickered in the towers, hinting at secrets unfolding inside. They remember how the castle seemed to loom larger whenever a Cassadine plot reached its darkest turn. To see it now softened, almost domesticated, feels like a denial of lived experience. Sidwell remains largely silent amid the growing discontent. As the new owner, he appears confident, even indifferent to the emotional storm his renovations have stirred. From his perspective, Wyndemere is property and asset to be improved and controlled. He speaks of progress and restoration, of bringing the castle into a new era. Yet his words ring hollow to those who understand that Wyndemere was never meant to be safe or comfortable. Its power came from its ability to intimidate. Ava watches all of this with a complicated mix of detachment and regret. Selling the castle was a decision made under pressure, and at the time she believed she was closing a chapter. Now she wonders if she underestimated the weight of what she let go. Ava knows what it means to be tied to a place that reflects one's darkest instincts. She senses that by passing Wyndemere on, she may have unleashed consequences she cannot predict. The Cassadine legacy itself seems to stir uneasily. Even absent from the castle, its influence lingers like a ghost refusing to be exorcised. Stories of betrayal, obsession, and ruthless ambition do not vanish just because walls are repainted. There is a growing sense that the castle's transformation is superficial, that beneath the polished exterior, something old and volatile still waits. Speculation continues to swirl about the true reason behind the change. Whispers of an off-screen disaster gain traction. A fire damaged set pieces destroyed irreplaceable elements of the original design. The rumor spreads not as gossip, but as a plausible explanation that comforts some fans. If the old Wyndemere was lost to an accident, then perhaps the change was not a creative choice, but a necessity born of crisis. This theory introduces a new layer of irony. A castle known for fictional danger may have been undone by real-world flames. The idea resonates because it mirrors the show's long-standing theme that control is always an illusion. Even the most carefully constructed empires can fall apart in an instant. If true, the fire becomes a silent parallel to the many catastrophes that befell the Cassadines themselves. Yet even this explanation does not fully satisfy. Fans want acknowledgement, not excuses. They want the story to reflect the change, rather than pretend it never happened. In a show built on emotional continuity, ignoring such a shift feels like a missed opportunity for drama. Characters could react, mourn the loss, or question the future. Instead, the silence persists, and the audience fills it with frustration. As days pass, the debate over Wyndemere becomes symbolic of a larger anxiety. Port Charles is changing. Old families lose power, new players rise, and familiar dynamics shift. The castle's altered appearance feels like a visual manifestation of that uncertainty. If Wyndemere can change so completely, what else might be vulnerable? This tension eventually reaches a breaking point when characters begin to confront the issue directly. Casual remarks turn into pointed observations. Someone notes that the castle feels wrong. Another admits they avoid it now because it no longer feels like itself. These moments are subtle but powerful because they validate what viewers have been feeling all along. Sidwell senses the resistance and responds with calculated calm. He insists that Wyndemere is still Wyndemere, that history lives in people, not in stone. His argument is logical but emotionally tone-deaf. For those who grew up under the shadow of the castle, history is inseparable from place. You cannot strip away atmosphere and expect memory to survive untouched. The idea that the old castle might return begins to take on a mythic quality. Fans imagine a dramatic reveal where renovations peel back to expose the original Gothic facade. Perhaps Sidwell's changes are only temporary or even deceptive. Maybe the castle is hiding its true face, waiting for the right moment to reveal it again. This hope keeps viewers invested. It transforms disappointment into anticipation. Every shot of Wyndemere is scrutinized for clues. Shadows seem darker at certain angles. A corridor appears older than the rest. These details fuel the belief that the castle's soul is not gone, just dormant. Behind the scenes, logic supports this optimism. Repairing a damaged set would take time, but not forever. When restoration is complete, the production could seamlessly transition back to the original design. If that happens, the current controversy will be remembered as a strange interlude rather than a permanent loss. The potential return of the old Wyndemere would carry enormous narrative weight. It would feel like the past reclaiming its place, a reminder that some legacies cannot be erased. The Cassadine darkness would once again have a physical embodiment looming over Port Charles. As the storyline edges toward resolution, the emotional stakes rise. Fans brace themselves for disappointment or vindication. The castle stands unchanged for now, but the meaning of that stillness is unclear. Is it a sign of finality, or merely the calm before a reveal? When the moment finally comes, it is understated yet profound. A scene returns to Wyndemere at dusk. The light fades and shadows stretch across the stone. For a brief instant, the castle looks different. The angles seem sharper, the presence heavier. It is not a full transformation, but a suggestion enough to ignite hope. The old menace flickers back into view like a memory refusing to die. This ending does not answer every question, but it restores something essential. It acknowledges the audience's bond with Wyndemere and honors the idea that history endures even when appearances change. The castle remains a symbol of uncertainty, danger, and legacy, exactly as it should be. In that final image, Wyndemere stands between past and future, neither fully restored nor entirely transformed. It is a reminder that in Port Charles nothing is ever truly lost, and that the shadows always find a way to return.